Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I'm doing a mini book review. So I've started to change up my mini reviews. I'm no longer just doing them 5 at a time, primarily because I read 18 books in March, and because of that I have sort of groupings of books, and it seemed like a better idea to me to do them in types of books or genres as opposed to just 5 random books in the order that I read them. Therefore, today I am reviewing the 3 classics that I've read in the last 2 months. Strangely, and not at all intentionally, they all had a nautical theme. 3 books are 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, and Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Like I said, I didn't intend for all of these to be nautical, but I do love the water, so it makes sense. The book was published in the 1860s. The basic plot of it is there is a professor and his assistant and this guy that was on a ship with them, and they go around the world trying to find this mythical monster, basically, that's been attacking ships. Turns out they find it, and it's the Nautilus, run by Captain Ahab. Not Ahab, that's the wrong book. Run by Captain Nemo, who has decided that he didn't want to have anything to do with humanity or land anymore, so he built this amazing ship that can submerge to unknown depths and basically never has to touch land again, and filled it with a crew who also had no ties to the land. They take on the professor and his friends and go 20,000 leagues around the sea. This book was actually a big surprise to me. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did, but I loved it. At the moment, it's definitely in my top 5 that I've read this year. Like I said, it was written in the 1860s, so there's a lot of Latin in it, in part because of the professor. That's what he does. He and his assistant classify nautical beings and aquatic life, that's the word I'm looking for. So there is a lot of Latin in this, which can sometimes get a little bit overwhelming, but I found the science really interesting just because we don't know very much about the oceans even now, and in the 1860s we knew even less. I absolutely adored the feeling of this book. It read as if it were modern English less than 1860s English, which I find an incredible feat because a lot of the older books tend to be very difficult to read and choppy because there's 17,000 commas in a sentence, or because they're using words that we don't recognize anymore. Any of the above. This book didn't do that. The one big problem I had, like I said, was the Latin, but even that was very manageable. Like I said, I adored this book. The descriptions were great. When they had a couple of their problems, I was actually really concerned because I'd never read this before. I had no idea what was going on. But I did then proceed to go and buy 6 other books of Jules Verne so I can read those. I gave this one a 5 out of 5. And then the shortest of the lot was The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. This one, in accordance with its length, I don't have quite as much to say about. This book follows an old man who goes out fishing one day and catches this huge fish, and everything that he does to get the fish and then to get it back home and all of that fun stuff. I said this in my March wrap-up and I'll say it again. Ernest Hemingway is the author that at least my teachers use for the quintessential 1/10 of the iceberg above water and 9/10 of it below water, so you really have to dig in deep and analyze the book to get the meaning of it. I'm not planning on analyzing this book or any of Hemingway's works anytime soon, which means that I basically only get the very superficial reading of it. However, it was an enjoyable reading. It reads very quickly, his sentences are short and choppy because that's just how he writes. That said though, the descriptions were actually pretty good. I was a little bit surprised because I expected Hemingway's works to be non-descriptive, almost, without any of them. It was just, I expected it to be, I ran, I fished, I slept kind of thing, as opposed to the sea was blue and there were no clouds in the sky and the sun was really bright. Better written than that, but that kind of feel. So I was actually pleasantly surprised by this. I think I gave it a 3 or 4 out of 5. And then what I think is the longest book in this, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I read this because I am taking an oil and gas law class right now, and we read chapter 88 in this book talking about waifs, which are little coin-like things on the ends of harpoons, if I remember correctly, that are markers, basically. And it was fast fish and loose fish, which sounds very much so like Dr. Seuss to me. maybe it's just me. At any rate, this book follows Ishmael as he gets on a whaling ship under Captain Ahab, and they go and kill several whales for their oil, sperm whales specifically. Apparently those are the whales whose oil is most valuable. And during the voyage, Captain Ahab reveals to them that this big white whale, Moby Dick, took his leg several years ago, and he wants to kill the whale in return. This book was a little bit harder to read than the other two, primarily because it didn't have as much of a plot. At least with Old Man and the Sea, it's short enough that you don't expect a really elaborate plot like Game of Thrones. This one is long enough that there should be some sort of plot, but as opposed to a plot, it seemed like Melville just introduced Ishmael in the beginning, put him on a whaling ship, and said, now I'm going to write you a treatise about whaling that everybody will read because they think I will at some point get back to the plot, since this was originally published serially. At the very end of the book, the last couple of chapters, maybe the last 100 pages, but at any rate, he does finally get back to Ahab and his vengeance against the whale, but for the most part it definitely read more like a whaling treatise with the waifs and how they cut up the whale and how they boiled down the oil from the blubber and all that kind of stuff. It was a very interesting read, don't get me wrong, but it was a little bit dry. I read the first half of the book on in this copy, and then I read the last half of it on audiobook because I was driving to Duluth for Easter and didn't want to take this book with me, so I just read it on audiobook and finished it. The audiobook was quite enjoyable as well, and almost a little bit better than actually reading it, but I do think both of them are good. Also, as I've said, the ending of this book surprised me so much. Somehow, I think maybe enough people haven't read Moby Dick, or maybe it's just that he spends almost 600 pages trying to find the white whale, that nobody remembers what the ending is. So nobody tells you what the ending is. I don't think you could be spoiled on this book if you tried. I mean, unless you went on SparkNotes or something. But nobody told me what happened in this book. And so I read the book, and then I was driving to Duluth, and I'm in the middle of Chippewa Forest, and all of a sudden, there's the ending, and I'm like, oh, did not expect that. It was not at all what I had expected. So that was just kind of a fun little twist ending for me. It said, I enjoyed this book. It was a bit slow because it was a whaling treatise more than anything. But I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars simply because the writing was very elegant, even though it was very scientific. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up down below. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button down below. Let me know which of these you've read, if any, and what you thought of them. As always, I will leave my Goodreads linked in the down bar if you want to check out what I read. Until my next video, bye!